You're listening to the Agent and the Fan podcast with sports agent Chris Leible and fan Lou Columna.
Welcome, everybody, to the Agent and the Fan podcast. I'm Chris Leible. I'm the agent. I'm with my man, Lou Columna. Lou is the fan. What's up, Lou?
Not much. What's going on, man?
A lot is going on, and you know that already. We got post-All-Star game. We have trade deadline. A lot of exciting things. Training camps are opening in the NFL. The Olympics are going on. We have so many things to talk about. Very exciting, very fun. We also have a very special guest today, Rob Parker, who is on Fox Sports Radio on The Odd Couple with Chris Broussard. And Rob is an old friend of mine. I've known since I started in the business. Him and I, for whatever reason, we always had a special connection. And we'll get into it. He should be joining us momentarily, but I'm looking forward to getting him onto the show and to talk to him, also, of course, about what's going on in the world today, but also and what he's doing now, but also go back in the time machine to when I first got into the business and I started in the front office with the Mets and when I was a super fan myself of my Darryl Strawberry, Doc Gooden, those guys, and Eric Davis, all guys that Rob knows well and covered and stuff. So I do want to talk about that. That'd be fun.
No, for sure, man. Listen, I remember reading the Newsday, and I was a big fan of Rob Parker then. So it'd be interesting to see what he's up to now, what he's doing. He's doing some pretty cool stuff, and we'll be on that.
Yeah, Rob's a local guy, and I say local, meaning where we're from. In the metropolitan area, and we'll talk about that with him. But I think it's going to be fun to kind of chat it up with him and get into it a little bit with him, and then obviously we'll cover some other things as well. So
stuff. Man, it's a listen, from a Yankee standpoint, it's been pretty brutal the last 6 weeks, but I see the sun rising back, and I think we're going to be all right. The Mets have been steady. They were on fire, after being kind of down, and now they've kind of steadied the ship. So, and that'll be interesting to see what both of these teams do moving forward, pretty soon, actually.
Yeah, no, I think with the Mets still have the most wins in July in baseball by a few wins, I think. I just saw, and so that's exciting for them. Like you said, they've had a little ups and downs, but they've been very steady, and they've been able to maintain in a very tightly contested playoff race. They've been able to kind of open it up a little bit and stay on top, but just as we discussed this on our podcast in May when they were struggling, and I told you there's too much time in the season left to just give up on everything. A few day losing streak could put them out quickly too. So I think the key is just being consistent and winning. And since you brought it up, I figured I'd have to say it. The Subway Series this year didn't go your way this year.
Oh, my God. The Mets, I was hoping you'd forget about that.
No one's going to forget about that. And definitely no Met fan. And I don't think any Yankee fan will forget about it either. They'll try, but I don't think they will, really, if they're being honest with themselves. And so, was this the first time that the Mets, I think it's the first time the Mets swept the Yankees. It's the first time anybody swept anybody in the series?
Yeah, I think so. Listen, they've only played 4 games, so it's 2-2. So that's a little, weird that way. And next year is going to be different. But yeah, man, listen.
4 is 4. It's still, that's a lot of games.
I know.
Series is...
We'll survive, though. We'll survive. We're playing well now.
Well, the Mets are now maybe some of the Met fans, maybe we'll hear from some of our Mets fans, but are they rooting for they're playing the Phillies right now. Are they rooting for the Yankees? See, my dad was literally.
We got Rob here ready to go. So Chris, if you want to do the introduction.
Yeah, no. So without a hesitation, let's bring in Rob Parker. We talked about him a few minutes ago. Rob, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you got a tight schedule. Thank you for coming on.
Sorry, I'm a little late. How you guys doing? Awesome.
Doing well.
No, we're doing great. Rob, I was explaining to our audience earlier and a little bit with Lou. So you and I go way, way back. I think when both of us were just getting really started in the business. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but you and I we always hit it off. We always had a special connection. I don't know if it was that we were from the same area. I don't know what it was, but we had we always had we liked the same things. We had the same interests. And for whatever reason, we just always hit it off. And I know obviously we've kind of gone different directions in our careers, and we don't see each other talk as much as we did way back in the day. Right. But I always feel a special, kinship with you.
100%. Yeah. Those were the formative years. I met a lot of people during those years, and to see so many people doing so many great things and, in their careers. And, we were young pups back then when we first started. And now it's, the gray hair and all the other stuff that's going on, it's kind of amazing. I was telling Lawrence Butler, I was interviewing him from the Oakland A's. He's the right fielder who's a good young player, won AL Player of the Week 2 weeks ago for the first time. And I was just telling him how long I have been covering baseball. He's 24, and I was like, the first athlete I ever interviewed was Darryl Strawberry in 1983 at Shea Stadium. I was 19 in college. Straw was a rookie. He had just come up. This is like June of 1983. Strawberry came up in May.
He was 21, yeah.
He was 21, and I was 19. And that's how long I've been covering the game. And he was just like, wow, almost 40 years. I said, yeah, it's been crazy. And I was at Citi Field when they retired Straw's number. So it was great. You know what I mean? To have that full circle kind of moment.
I was there as well, and it's crazy. So the SNY, the Mets, cable network did a documentary on them, and it's crazy because So I was having this discussion with a friend of my dad's. He brought me to a store to get a Darryl jersey in 1982. I was still a kid. I was in school, and I got a Darryl jersey when I found out what number he was going to be wearing, 18, and I saved it. And when he got called up, I wore it probably every day. And I wore it to a game in 1983. My dad took me to, and they put me on the Diamond Vision scoreboard, which was like an innovation back then. And I was in the Darryl documentary on SNY. And
that's amazing.
Fast forward. I brought my 10-year-old to the game, and I have the jersey still, and he wore it.
That's an amazing story. What a great story.
So he wore it to the game. So it was so, like you said, full circle.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. It was good to see Strawberry's really turned his life around, and happy to see him and Doc, back around, and their numbers retired, and they were a big part of the Mets and what transpired there when those guys came. It's not often that the Yankees take second fiddle or back or not on the back page in the New York newspapers, but during that Strawberry Gooden era when the Mets won, it was definitely a Mets town. And you remember that, like the Mets were on the back page way more than the Yankees back in those days.
For sure.
The Mets owned the town and in those years, and these guys were the polarizing figures, even though the Yankees had some decent teams those years, but the Mets had the polarizing figures, and Doc and Darryl were the driving forces, really.
No doubt. It was interesting to see back then, and I remember going to the parade after they won the World Series. I always think of 1986 as a hard place to be a Yankee fan, because there was nowhere to root for, right? You don't want the Red Sox to win the World Series, but you don't want the Mets to win either. So you were kind of
that
stuck,
was brutal.
right?
That was brutal. I can testify that was brutal. But Rob, I wanted to get back to you. I was a fan, reading your columns on Newsday, and it dawned on me, like, at that time when you started, there weren't many Black columnists. And who inspired you to get into this? And then, a Black columnist, covering, Black players back then. What was that dynamic like?
It's funny. No one in my family's in the newspaper business or in the media or anything. And I grew up as a kid in New York watching The Odd Couple on television. and Jack Klugman played Oscar Madison, the sloppy sports writer, and this is true. And so my teacher, when I was in second grade, her name was Miss Noble. I was 7 years old. I went to PS 50 in South Jamaica off of Liberty Avenue.
PS 86.
Okay, you know it. And she pulled me aside from class one day, and she said to me, and I'll never forget it. She said, "Robert, when you grow up, you should be a writer. You're a really good writer." And can you imagine a teacher planting that in the head of a 7-year-old? As I think back to it all the time, I'm like, what did I write that she could identify me as a good writer at 7 years old? You know, so that was in the back of my head. I love sports. I wanted to play first base for the Mets. That was my childhood dream, growing up in Jamaica, Queens, and all that. Taking the number 7 train to Shea and all that. And of course, I just wasn't that good. So at some point, you realize, you know, you're not making it to the major leagues. I'm like, well, what else could I do? So I used to watch this show, The Odd Couple, and I said, this dude has the greatest job in the world. Goes to the ball games, eats free food, travels the country, all this stuff. He has his picture in the newspaper. And so that became my dream. And when I was 9 years old, I started telling my friends, I want to be a sports writer. I want to have my own column in the paper. And so when I got the job at the Daily News at 22 years old, I was just 5 months out of college. And at that time, the Daily News was the biggest paper in the country. Nobody could believe I got that job. But all my friends were not surprised that that's the route I took, because they were like, that's all you ever talked about was being a sports writer. And so it seemed like it was destined for me.
It's funny you say that, Rob, because my friends that I grew up with did the same thing. They're like, you're the only person I know who called their shot. You want to work for the Mets, you work for the Mets, and then you want to be an agent, and you became an agent. And there's something to be said about it. And it's amazing that that's a crazy story that your teacher, like you said, 7 years old, I could see 13, 14,
right.
7 years old. She was like, you should be a writer. And what an impact.
She was a young teacher who was in her 20s, like her first teaching job. But that's why I tell people all the time how important teachers and role models and parents are to kids. Because if you tell a kid that they're dumb and stupid, they're going to believe that. If you tell a kid that they can achieve anything and that they can be anything they want, I think it's powerful. And I think that reinforcement and letting kids, you know, dream and hope and wish and reach for the stars and all that. I know it sounds cliche, but there's no way with my background and my family that anybody in their right mind could have said, you're not going to be a sports columnist for a newspaper. It's not in your family. You know, nobody's ever done it. When I was growing up, there were no black columnists for me to even look at in the paper and say, oh, I want to be like him. It wasn't. But I still said that's the job that I want. And I'm very happy as I approach. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, who was your mentor?
So my first mentor was a guy named Ronnie Duncan, who was a TV sportscaster in New Haven, Connecticut, and a young black guy. He was doing weekends, and I was his intern. And just to see a guy on television doing sports, and I grew up in the era, I told you, in the 80s, watching Warner Wolf on television. He was I was a big fan of Warner Wolf. Yeah, no doubt. Let's go to the videotape with the crooked finger. Yes. And I have a Warner Wolf
great guy
story.
too, by the way.
Yeah.
Warner was an awesome guy.
So when I was in high school, I wrote a letter to Warner Wolf. This is like 1980. I'm 16 years old. I write a letter. And it's about American history class. The teacher's talking about Patrick Henry first said, give me liberty. And then I was being a Weisenheimer, and I yelled out in the class, or give me a break. You know, Warner used to always say, give me a break. So everybody in class laughed. So I went home and I wrote this letter to Warner Wolf. And I wrote like, dear Warner, if you're at least going to use somebody else's line, use the whole thing. Patrick Henry first said, give me liberty or give me a break. So I'm watching the news one night. This is in the 80s. You can't record it. You know, either you see it or you miss it. Watching the news, he does the sports. And at the end, if you remember, Warner used to show horse racing at the very end.
Yeah.
So he does the sports, and then he's like, and then my friends are like, we're watching, They're like, turn the channel, it's over. Let's turn the channel. I'm like, let's just watch it till the end. I don't know what made me say that because it was horse racing.
Yeah.
And then after the horse racing went off, I swear to you, he grabbed a piece of paper and talked to the Yankees like, I got a letter from a viewer in Jamaica, Queens. And I swear, I could see my writing on the page. My heart just sunk. He says, Dear Warner, if you're going to at least use somebody else's line, use the whole thing. Patrick Henry first said, give me liberty or give me a break. Warner goes, boo, that was terrible. He crumples the paper up, throws it over his shoulder. All the anchors start laughing and whatnot. And I was hooked. I was like, oh, my God. I just wrote something that somebody read on television.
Did you ever meet him?
Yes. Told him the story.
Oh, my gosh.
I eventually, I could never get the video, which I wish I could have. I don't know. They might have it in the archives.
They must.
It was unbelievable experience. So I had that. And then my last one, I'm going to tell you one more story. And then, so again, I'm 16 years old. This is 1980. The school newspaper, I went to Martin Van Buren High School in Queens Village, New York. And the newspaper took too long to come out. You would write a story about the men's basketball team. By the time it came out, it was baseball season. So the next year after that, I went to the principal. I said, I want to start an all sports newspaper that comes out on time every month. There was no such thing as an all sports newspaper. Right. In fact, you remember the National when it came out?
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah. The National came out 9 years after I came up with this idea. I told my principal. Principal's like, nope, can't do it. The kid's only going to throw it on the ground as garbage. Can you imagine an educator telling a young kid not to start a newspaper or talk about journalism, that the kids are going to throw it on the ground as garbage? So then I wasn't fazed. And then the principal caught himself and he's like, we don't have any money. He used that as the excuse on the reason why. So I said, well, if I raise the money, could we do it? He said, yeah, if you could pay for the printing costs, sure. So I went home. I wrote 3 letters to the 3 newspapers. I wrote a letter to the Daily News, to the New York Post, and the New York Times. And I wrote to the publisher of all the papers. The Daily News was my favorite paper. They didn't write me back. This is 1980. I'm 16. The New York Times wrote me a letter back saying it was against their company policy to help people start newspapers. I'm 16. Like, how in the world am I competition?
Yeah.
Somebody actually sat down and wrote a letter to a 16-year-old saying that they can't do it against company policy. Fine. The last letter went to the New York Post. I get home from school. There's an envelope from the New York Post. I still see the return address, 210 South Street, where the paper used to be. All that. I see it. I'm like, this feels like a check. That's what I said. Not a letter. It feels like a check. I open it up. It was a check for $50 to start my newspaper. Do you know who I wrote that letter to? I wrote that letter to Rupert Murdoch, who, of course, owns Fox.
Wow.
And it was from his office that they sent me a check
to
start my newspaper. That is, and I tell this to all the kids whenever I speak to students about making your own way. No one's going to knock on your door and say, hey, I got this great job and career for you. You got to make your own way. And I got a chance a few years ago when I was on the set of Undisputed at FS1 out here in LA to tell Rupert Murdoch that story. And he was amazed. He was like, are you serious? I said, absolutely, a true story. So I've been blessed with these kind of things that have happened in my career. And that was a big one, no doubt about it.
But you made them happen, Rob.
You're right.
You have to put pen to paper and say, this is what I want.
But that's your point. That was your point.
That's my point, that you have to make your own way. You can't be waiting for other people to lift you up and do for you. And don't be afraid. The reason most people don't succeed in life is they're afraid to fail.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid to fail. Everybody who's ever achieved anything has failed numerous times.
That's amazing.
It's very true. Rob, I know you got to run really quickly. Can you give me a 30-second? Can you give our audience a 30-second on what on your show now? What you're up to?
Yep. So you can check us out every night on Fox Sports Radio. The Odd Couple, me and Chris Broussard.
The Odd Couple's back again. Now I know where it really came from.
That's where it came from, in the name of the show, and it fits me and Chris because we are opposite. You know, he's Felix, I'm Oscar. I just want you to know.
Figured as much.
But no, the show is on Fox Sports Radio 7 to 10 p.m. You could get it on Sirius channel 83 or on the Premiere on the iHeart app. So I do that. I work for MLB Network. I'm on Brian Kenny's show every week. MLB Now on Thursdays. Love doing that, mixing it up with him. I teach at USC. Last semester, I taught a baseball writing class. It was fascinating. I love it.
Oh,
and then I have a couple of my own projects as well. I have a website called MLBbro.com where we just cover Black baseball players. We started it 4 years ago with 14 people. I have 70 people on staff. It's an incredible group. I get emails from kids all the time around the country saying, "Hey, Rob, can you teach me how to cover baseball?" So that's my joy now is to teach others how to cover the game. And 2 months ago in Detroit, I started also the first all-Black sports talk radio station in the country's history, Sports Rap Radio, AM 1270 Detroit. As you know, Chris, I worked in Detroit for 20 years. And I was the first on-air person they ever hired at WDFM when they started the first all-sports station. And 4 years ago in Detroit, they had 0 Black hosts on the radio, 0. And that's a city that's 83% Black.
I was going to say, yeah.
And that's what made me decide that I wanted to start this radio station and give an alternative for the people of Detroit. And my goal and my dream is to start in Detroit with one station, but eventually to become a network. And Sports Rap Radio is in Philadelphia and New York and Chicago and Atlanta and, Black cities all over the country. So that's my goal and dream. So as you can see, my plate is full, still working hard, still have goals and dreams, and I'm going to go all the way hard until I get to the finish line. And that's how I'm going to play it out.
No, Rob, we appreciate that, Rob. Sincerely.
Thank you so much. So much for coming on. It's always great to reconnect with you. We will talk. I want to catch up with you off air again soon, but thank you so much.
Yes, and invite me back. We'll do it again. Okay, another 100%. Time. I'll have more time.
Absolutely, we'll do it again. Thanks, Rob.
Peace.
Take care, Rob.
Rob Parker,
thank
everybody.
You.
That was awesome.
Very good. Very inspirational, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, he's lived a life, man, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Like I said, when I first started in the business, he's older than me. I had read his columns and things, and I really vibed with him, but I didn't know what he looked like. I really didn't know who he was. And then I met him and we just started talking and we really vibed. And then, it just kind of took off from there. We just became very good friends. It was funny because we were friends when he was in New York, but when he went, I think he went to Cincinnati at first to cover the Reds. And when he would come in to play the Mets, they would come in to play the Mets. That's when him and I really started hanging out and getting to know each other even better than, even more because, we were more concentrated in the time. So
yeah, we got to have him back. He has stories for days, man.
No, he's really good. And he's just a good dude. And, like you said, he wants to make an impact, and that's what he does. And so he's a great guy. So anyway, Lou, so that was that. What were we talking about? Was it about the Yankees?
Oh, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the trade deadline. Let's talk about the trade deadline.
Yeah, we do have to get into the trade deadline. So the trade deadline has been very interesting. I think, again, I don't want to keep going back to the same subject, but it's such a tight race. And there's such a fine line of, am I in it? Am I out of it? And these organizations are making decisions literally on a couple of game stretches almost. So you're seeing these different things. So, but right now it's kind of taken shape. You see who the sellers are, which there's been a few of them, although there's so many teams still in it that you don't see. You don't really see if they're selling or buying. And we're coming to the end right now.
Listen, it's coming to the end, but I think a lot of these teams, they're not going to say to their fan base. And I think they're saying to their fan base by what moves they're making, right? And so I think You look at Flattery in Detroit. They pulled him out of a game. You see where that's going. The fact that Tampa Bay is basically saying, hey, we're just going to start a new clean slate. That's really interesting for them, right? Because they're so good at player development. And so that's going to be interesting to see, okay, now they're going to get rid of all, a Rosarena, who knows, they get rid of their third baseman, who knows where Yandy Diaz goes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Rays, for me, they always seem to find guys with good replacements,
but
and they always seem to give up on the guys at the right times.
Yes.
So it's almost buyer beware with them.
I do, but you know what though? This is listen, they're great at what they do, but to do it time and time and time again, it's hard. And there's there might be some misses there that we don't see. Who knows? Listen, they are going to be busy until the very end because they got players that are desirable, that people want, and that to me is going to be, kind of seeing where these players go. St. Louis being another team, and I really thought that they were going to be active, and they are. Chicago, the Cubs. I mean, I thought they were going to be sellers, to be honest, and now they've no, we're going all in. So it's pretty interesting.
No, it's very interesting. The Blue Jays are another team that's turned out to be a seller. Another team that I think had a lot of hype and buzz early in the season, that they were in it to win it. Again, sometimes you have to make an executive decision. Ross Atkins, who's the GM, president of the team there, is an old friend, and I know Ross had every intention of competing, but at some point they made a decision to pull the plug, and I think they've picked up, I think I saw 11 guys or something like that. Similar almost what the Mets did last year. That'll restock your system and help it out. Now we're coming down right now to where we're actually recording this. It won't be the case when people are watching it, but we're coming into the final hours. There's still a handful of guys floating out there, so it'll be fascinating to see the events and how they shake down as the deadline ends, and then what the impact will be. Will Randy Arozarena, who's had a struggle this year, will he be able to kick it into gear and become the impact player that we've seen, including in the postseason?
I think he will
with the Mariners. I do too. I'm a fan of his.
Yeah, and I think being in a pennant race for a team, like Tampa Bay, that they weren't in a pennant race, and then all of a sudden you're in a pennant race. It's a different gear, right? Same thing with Jazz Chisholm of the Yankees, right? Once you're in a playoff team and a contending team, it's just a different gear. And I think guys kind of level up and hey, this is what I wanted. I'm here. Some guys rise to the occasion. Some guys, as don't. And that's going to be interesting to see. That storyline is going to be very interesting to see as the end of the season progresses, and see where we are playoff wise.
Yeah, I think with Jazz, he's an real interesting guy to me. Obviously, he doesn't necessarily fit the mold of what you would expect as a Yankee type of guy. Obviously, extremely talented player. How will he fit with the crew and join that? Will he conform with the group, or will he be kind of an individualist as he's been?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have strong personalities on that team. You have Aaron Judge. You have Soto, you have a veteran group of guys. He didn't have that in Miami, right? And so he was kind of in an island by himself. I think being, with the Yankees in this structured environment, I think is going to help him. And you've seen a little bit already. I mean, listen, I don't go too crazy with what he's done so far. That's great. But I think you're going to see a more steady player, with Miami.
I think from his talent and ability and his skill set, he's a great fit for the Yankees. The question is, how does he fit? Does he kind of conform with the group, or does he still kind of want to maintain the individual? Because the Yankees haven't been about that. and they need him to kind of join in and not. And so
yeah. I mean, I agree, but I think that part of the Yankee mystique has been a little bit kind of overblown. Like
maybe, but again,
I think you can be yourself, within the confines of what their rules are, right? Every team has rules. Some have more rules than others. So I always get kind of frustrated with that. We're like, oh, like the Yankee way. I'm like, listen, if you're a talented player, if you're a dynamic player, I see Verdugo taking 30 seconds to hit a, walk, after a home run. I've seen bat flips from the Yankees. I see, so this,
but,
it's like,
okay, but
I get it, but
that brings another question that maybe for another show, but
yeah.
Is it time for the Yankees to kind of change their ways?
No.
You don't think so?
No, I like it.
Okay, because
I'm old school.
Okay, but
there's certain, and listen, they on the back end, and this as an agent, they've changed some things on the back end, right? Remember the Yankees used to be, you're traveling, to LA, you're wearing a suit and tie. They've let that go.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Okay, but what I'm saying is, okay. So now, people were talking about Stroman at the beginning of the year. Can you imagine a Yankee player wearing a do-rag around the field or whatever? That's Stroman's thing. That's what he does. He likes to do. Okay. I mean, is it time to relax those things? I mean, you say, no, you're a traditionalist. You know who's not a traditionalist probably right about now? Phil Bickford. Phil Bickford's probably not very happy with the Yankees. He had a gorgeous mane of hair and a beautiful beard that we're all jealous of.
But you know what?
He came to the Yankees, but let me just make a point. He came to the Yankees for 5 days, and then he was gone. Well, he had to get rid of everything, and now everything's gone, and he doesn't even have a job. He can grow it back.
He can grow it back. And by the way, any player who's like that, let's say Bickford was a superstar of proportions. If I'm giving you 20, 30, 40, whatever $1 million a year, and this is what I want, you're going to turn it down. And if you are, then you're stupid. You know what I mean?
Oh, what if the Yankees gave him, the two teams gave him, and one team let him keep his hair if he was a superstar?
God bless. But that tells me more about that guy than it does about the Yankees, to be honest. Because
I don't know. I'm thinking I'm more of a traditionalist too.
I don't want to see India from the Breads, like with the long mane and I don't know. For me, I don't mind the mustache. Listen, the one thing I would say, hey, if you want to grow like a beard and have it,
Well, do they maybe make those? I mean, that was a
maybe, but I don't want to see freaking this guy from Philly Marsh with the.
Okay, but do you modify it? Is what I'm saying.
Maybe.
Well, that's
maybe
what I'm saying. I mean, you
but,
like mustaches because.
But there is something to be.
Lou, let me say, you like mustaches because Thurman Munson had a mustache. If Thurman Munson didn't play for the Yankees, he probably would have had a crazy head of hair and a bit of giant
look at Austin Wells. Look at Austin Wells with his mustache. Look at Nestor Cortez with his mustache. Okay,
but my point is, if Thurman Munson, I would hate mustaches and you would like giant beards, maybe. I don't know. Nah. You grew up loving Thurman Munson, probably. I mean,
Thurman's I love Thurman before me, obviously, but love Thurman. But listen,
But what I'm saying is, Thurman Munson came up in the 60s and 70s. He was probably a nonconformist. That was his rebellion, was growing his mustache down to here. I mean.
Oh, remember Mattingly in the 80s or the 90s rather, with the haircut.
Oh yeah, and the Simpsons, of course, mocked that and said that.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Mr.
like
Burns told them to get rid of his sideburns.
I like the Yankee way. I like the way they operate. And listen, it hasn't stopped them from winning championships, right? Yes, they haven't won.
But guys
they haven't won 2000. And I guess
Lou, guys have.
That's not because of the haircut.
But guys have conformed, right? The guys back in the day that came and joined the team, and look at what they did. Those guys conformed to the team, right? Whether going back into the 90s, look at all their role players. We've talked about this on the show, the Darryls and the Docs and the, David Cohns, and they all conformed to the Yankee kind of way, and it worked for them.
Yeah, I think so. Man, listen, if you're
Don't
winning,
forget the Reds also had the rule too,
the
no mustache rule. Paul O'Neill, it was a good fit for him. He didn't have to do anything.
You know what? You know who had it for a while too, very short while, was, and I mean, you know this because you represented him, the Marlins had that for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
And then because all the Jose thing with the hair.
That's right. Well, Jeffrey Loria was another character. Yeah. That's another story for another time.
Story for another day.
Huh?
That's a story for another day.
Yes, that's a story for another day for sure. Yeah, so very interesting things going on right now. I'm looking forward to seeing where things are going to go over the next few weeks. And really, I mean, as we're jetting into August here, things are starting to take shape, but I still believe there can be some drastic changes, and a good couple of weeks could make all the difference and make a team that was on the outside on the inside pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, if you're on the inside, as you know, and as we always talk about, you look at the Phillies and some of these teams the last couple of years, the Diamondbacks last year, you get hot at the right time and you could take this all the way and maybe even win yourself a championship somehow.
But I will say this before we go, you also have to be careful, because if you recall, the Dodgers were a contending team and they just went crazy and traded all of these players, the LeDuc, I don't know if you remember that, and where I was like, wow, like, I mean, those were big changes that didn't work out, and it was a little weird that they did that at that time. But again, they weren't the Dodgers of today. But also you got to be careful, right? Because you could bring in, to your point earlier, maybe bring in the wrong person, or maybe the person who, because you're desperate, you bring in a guy who's not quite a fit, but you bring him because you're desperate. So it's just going to be interesting to see how it ends up.
The other thing I wanted to talk about really quickly, and we're gonna get rolling, but it's very interesting to me how many guys are going back to teams that they've had some success on, or at least been with previously. It's so crazy. The Braves seem to always bring back the same people. All right, and Soler is now coming back there, and Luke, and these guys. Ahmed Rosario's going back to the Dodgers, who we had a little time with. You're seeing some of these guys, and then you always see guys like Jesse Winker, the Mets just got, who was an all-star in 21. Now, hope who's kind of been a little bit on the down, but look, he's a professional hitter. He's a good player. To me, he's a good ad for the Mets, because they need they need to get a little more production from their extra from their bench, and I think he's a guy who can start, but he also be a good bat off the bench and could come up and hit a home run in a key situation or something like that if you need a pinch hitter or whatever it is. So I think those types of guys are guys, and those are the ones that you see who hits, who misses, and who makes an impact and who doesn't. But I still think also at the end of the day, bullpens are key. What bullpen pieces have gone? Who's going to make impacts, and who maybe hasn't even gone to, right as we sit here right now and talk about this today. Who hasn't gone, who may go, who may end up being like a savior to a team in September, October.
Yep. That's going to be interesting to see. And listen, everything's going to be answered, but it's going to be quite a ride. It's going to be quite a ride.
Yeah. So that I think wraps everything up for us today. I just wanted to give and again a little moment to just remember Rachel Minaya, who is Omar Minaya's wife. They're old friends of mine. Just a great lady and a good family, and they have two sons, Teddy and Justin. Justin's actually in the NBA with the Trailblazers. I just was at the service the other day, and she was just a spectacular person, human being, and just a great lady, and just way too young. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned her and sent my love to the family, and I've done it privately, but I want to just make a note of it on here as well. Such a huge loss. Omar obviously has a long, outstanding career around the game with the Yankees. Actually, now obviously made a name with the Mets, but they live here in New Jersey, and just really good people. And she's just just a special lady, and just really sorry to hear that we lost her at such a young age. So my thoughts and prayers are with the Minaya family.
Yes, well spoken, well said, rather. Yeah, from what I've heard and reading about it, she was an amazing woman, so she's going to be missed.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you for everybody for tuning in, and special thank you to Rob Parker for joining us. He was great. Make sure you check out The Odd Couple on Fox Sports Radio with Rob and Chris Broussard. And thank you for everybody for joining in. And we'll see you guys again next week. Take care.